You should be grateful I married a wife whose cooking is as bad as yours, huh? Is my cooking really that bad? It's not just bad, it's atrocious. I thought it was dog food. Don't talk like that. I'm Chloe, 35 years old. I've been married to my husband, Jones, for 10 years. Up until a few years ago, we lived in my in-laws' house with my mother-in-law, Eula, and my grandmother-in-law. But since my grandmother-in-law moved into a nursing home, now it's just the three of us. I work at a pharmaceutical company and have busy days, but all the household chores are my responsibility. I wake up early every morning to prepare breakfast and get dinner prepped. Jones doesn't support me in this, and together with Eula, they take advantage of me. Recently, I discovered that Jones has been bad-mouthing my cooking on the internet. Yesterday's post read, "Another day of mediocre food for my wife. I really want a divorce." I checked his past posts, and they were all shockingly cruel. "One who can't even do household chores shouldn't have married me," he wrote. I pride myself on cooking and doing the best I can with household chores. Unable to tolerate his unreasonable complaints, I confronted Jones. "What's the meaning of those posts? Do you really think that way?" Jones looked caught off guard for a moment, but then brazenly replied, "Yes, that's right. You're a failure of a wife, only ever making one soup and one dish." Admittedly, I often make simple meals due to time constraints. I get home from work around 7 p.m. By the time I cook and we eat, it's almost 8 p.m. Eula starts complaining about being hungry if it's late, and Jones grumbles if dinner isn't ready when he gets home. Naturally, the number of dishes I prepare is limited. Neither Jones nor Eula ever help with the chores, yet they complain. There's a reason I can't stand up to them strongly. I've been struggling with unexplained infertility and haven't been able to get pregnant. At first, both Jones and Eula eagerly anticipated a child, but recently they've stopped mentioning it. Instead, Jones often berates me, saying, "I gave up on having children for you, so at least earn money and do the household chores." Eula agrees, adding, "A wife like you who can't do anything right is a disgrace to our family." Initially, I fought back and asked them to stop speaking to me that way, but their constant insults have worn me down, and I've started to accept them. I feel guilty about not being able to have children, and I've been pushing myself to work and do household chores. Then one day, Jones lashed out at me worse than ever before. He came home irritated from work and started complaining. "I'm immediately tired from work, and I come home to this kind of meal again. This isn't a zoo. Stop using only vegetables. I'm not a rabbit. Use meat. Increase the number of dishes." As Jones got more agitated, he finally shouted at me. I was so surprised that I looked at Jones dumbfounded, but he didn't stop complaining. "How can I eat this leftover-like food? The food is terrible. You can't even have children. I don't need a woman like you." When Jones said that, Eula agreed. "Really? Huh? I thought it was dog food." I reached my breaking point with Jones and Eula's abusive words. "If you're going to complain that much, I won't cook anymore. We both work, so you two should help with the chores. And about the leftover-like meals, what do you expect when I only have $50 a month for groceries?" As I fired back, Jones got even angrier. "If you have a problem, you can leave, and if we divorce, it's your fault, so you'll be paying the court fees." Overwhelmed with anger, I thought the divorce court's deposit was irrelevant, so I packed my things and left my in-laws' house. As I left, neither Jones nor Eula tried to stop me, both wearing their sarcastic smiles. Then I went straight to my parents' house. Upon my return home, my parents, though surprised, welcomed me warmly. After a long while, I enjoyed my mom's lavish cooking at home and spent a relaxed time with my family of 3. My parents had sensed something amiss between me and Jones, but they waited until I was ready to speak. 3 days after I returned to my parents' house, feeling emotionally stable, I told them about what Jones and Eula had done to me. Upon hearing my story, my parents were furious and urged me to get a divorce immediately. By then, I had already decided to divorce and was thinking of hiring a lawyer to proceed. However, I couldn't come to terms with ending things without getting back at Jones and Eula. I began to plot how I could make them pay and came up with a plan. As I was preparing, Jones contacted me saying, "Hey, I wrote the divorce papers. Come and get them." Jones had kindly prepared the divorce application. Seeing it as a good opportunity, I headed to my in-laws' house to execute my plan. When I entered the in-laws' house, as expected, it was tidy. Odd for Jones and Eula, who never cleaned or did laundry. But I entered, thinking to myself as I suspected, noting the oddities in the house but not mentioning them. I started talking with Jones and Eula. "Jones, are we really getting divorced?" I asked. "Of course. Why wouldn't we? I need a wife who can't even handle household chores properly," replied Jones. When Jones said that, I asked Grandma, "Did you hear that?" I called her into the living room. It was Jones's grandmother, Eula's stepmother. Eula, surprised, exclaimed, "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" That's exactly what happened. In fact, the plan I had come up with was to call his step-grandmother. Eula was always deferential to this step-grandmother, the reason being this in-law's house originally belonged to her. The father-in-law had passed away due to illness. The step-grandmother, by her own wish, was now living in a nursing home and had promised to leave the house and land to Eula and her family after passing. Given these circumstances, Eula could never stand up to her stepmother. From the beginning of our marriage, I had a good relationship with this step-grandmother and actually visited her frequently at the nursing home. We shared various stories and deepened our bond, but I never mentioned the bullying by Eula and Jones. I thought it would only trouble the step-grandmother to hear such things. However, one day she noticed something was off with me and asked why. Unable to hold back, I cried and confided in her about the bullying by the two. At that time, it ended with just a conversation, but she had told me to speak up immediately if anything happened, promising to help. I didn't want to burden her, but this time I decided to seek her help. Usually gentle, the step-grandmother's face turned angry as she said, "You two? What did you do to Chloe? Bullying your wife? How shameful!" Eula and Jan, scolded by her, couldn't argue back, just looked down silently. But then Jan started making excuses. "Well, Chloe can't have children, and she makes too few dishes in cooking." The step-grandmother sighed and said, "That's because the food budget is only $50. I heard it from Chloe. Because of Jones's debts, there's no money to spend on food." Hearing this, Jan, surprised, exclaimed, "Chloe, you told Grandma? I told you to keep quiet." Actually, Jones has a significant amount of debt. It came to light 2 years ago. Jones got hooked on horse racing, which he started attending with a friend and ended up spending a considerable amount. At that time, we even discussed divorce. But after Jones sincerely apologized and promised never to do it again, we decided not to divorce and repay the debt together. Back then, I was somewhat grateful to Jones for marrying me despite my inability to have children, so I couldn't bring myself to leave him. Fortunately, I was working too, and we figured out that if we saved enough each month, we could repay it all in 3 years. And this year, we were finally going to finish paying off the entire debt. That's why we only had $50 a month to spend on groceries. "Chloe, you should be thanked for paying off the debt, not bullied. It's unacceptable," the step-grandmother scolded. Jones, as I heard a noise outside the living room as I expected, I called out to the person I assumed was hiding. "Why don't you come out? I know you're in there." As I called out, Jones and Eula started to panic. "What are you talking about? That's right, there's no one here." But then someone walked through the living room door. I knew it. I thought someone was here. The person who entered was a young woman I didn't recognize. Jones, Eula, and the young woman all stood there, faces pale. Even my step-grandmother seemed shocked by this turn of events, her face a picture of confusion. I had suspected for some time that Jones was cheating on me. He had always belittled my infertility and complained about my cooking, but it had never been this bad. Over the past year, both Jones and Eula had become increasingly harsh towards me. I began to feel that Jones wanted a divorce. He was probably planning to remarry, having an affair with a younger woman. Eula, hoping for a grandchild, seemed to be conspiring with him to drive me out. This was all happening now because they had finally managed to pay off their debts. They had been relying on my earnings to pay off these debts, but once they were done, I was no longer needed. I had a hunch that after I left the house, they would already be living with this woman in the in-laws' house, and my suspicion was confirmed. The discomfort I felt when I entered the in-laws' house today was a clear sign that Jones's mistress was already living there. During the argument, I deliberately spoke loudly so the woman hiding in the house could hear me talk about the bullying and the debts. I figured she was unaware of these facts, so I decided to reveal their true nature. As expected, the woman, now aware of the truth, I came into the living room with a pale face. Wait a minute. Bullying your wife? Debts? You said you were already divorced, liar. Apparently, Jones had lied about being divorced to date her. He said his ex-wife was coming over to ask for money today, but that was a lie. This isn't about divorce negotiations. It seemed that Jones made up a story about me coming to borrow money from his family. I laughed and said, I'm not struggling for money. I work for a pharmaceutical company and actually earn quite a high salary, to be honest. I earn more than Jones. Hearing this, the woman said, Is that so? But Jones said he was a department head at a pharmaceutical company and that he paid for this house in full. I couldn't stop laughing, knowing Jones had been lying through his teeth. That's a lie. This house belongs to my grandmother, I said. Jones. He was a full-time employee but was fired 2 years ago due to gambling troubles. He's just a contract worker now. Even as I explained, I wondered why I'd stayed married to such a man. Perhaps it was because I felt inferior about not being able to have children, but I regretted not divorcing him sooner. Anyway, it's no longer my concern. I'll be getting a divorce and I'll be suing you both for alimony, I declared. When I said that, the woman exclaimed, Wait a minute. I didn't know this man was married. I was deceived. I looked at the woman's pleading face and felt that she was probably telling the truth. If that's true, why don't you also demand a deposit from Jones? Weren't you two engaged? I noticed a ring on the woman's finger and guessed that they were probably engaged. Yes, he proposed to me last month, she confirmed. As expected, these two were engaged. This meant that Jones had been deceiving this woman, so there was a possibility of a deposit being required, engagement or not. I told her to consult with a lawyer for the rest and let her go home. I believe you're a victim too. Can you discuss this with your lawyer? I'm going to have a talk with Jones and others today, so please go home, I said. Upon hearing this, the woman crying responded, Understood. I'm sorry. Even though I didn't know, I won't see him again. Then Jones and Ula started begging the woman, Wait, you're going to leave? You're abandoning me. What about our grandchild? Weren't you going to support me? The woman, with a look of disgust, said, Don't touch me. I don't want to see your face ever again. I can't deal with people who bully their wives and gamble. I'll contact you through a lawyer later, so be prepared. With that, the woman left the house. Then I signed the divorce papers I had received from Jones. Well, I've signed this, so I'm going to file it now. From now on, you and I are strangers, I declared. As I said this, Jones suddenly changed his attitude and started apologizing to me. I'm sorry, it was just a moment of folly. You're the only one for me. Let's not divorce, he pleaded. Wondering what he was talking about now, I said, It's because she dumped you, right? I'm tired of being used by you. Then Ula, also crying, pleaded, I'm sorry. We were wrong. We don't need a grandchild anymore. We're in trouble without you. I looked at Ula coldly and said, It's about money, right? You're saying this because you'll be in trouble without my salary. Ula, as if I hit the nail on the head, stammered, No, it's not like that. Delivering the final blow, I said, From now on, you'll have to manage with Jones's meager salary. I'm taking the savings I had for the divorce settlement. Saying that, I put the banking card I had kept in the drawer into my bag. Jones grabbed the bag, pleading, Please don't do that. I can't pay off the rest of my debts without that money. It's my salary in here. I was saving it for the debt. It's no longer my concern, I replied firmly. As Jones and I were arguing, my step-grandmother stood up and scolded him. Stop it. You're really pathetic. I'm ashamed that people like you are my family. Leave this house. I'm cutting ties with you. Ula turned pale when my step-grandmother declared she was cutting ties. Charlotte, don't say that. Where will we go if we lose this house? She pleaded helplessly. I don't care. You are only after my house and land. You're not family. Get out, my step-grandmother insisted. Ula and Jones ended up being divorced by me and disowned by my step-grandmother. Left wandering, later my step-grandmother immediately asked a lawyer she knew to start negotiations to evict Ula and Jones from the house. Ula and Jones managed to find an old apartment, and started living there as mother and son. I also immediately filed the divorce papers at the office. Since I brought the banking card as the divorce settlement, I was able to easily sever ties with those two. A month after the divorce, I glanced at Jones's account and saw that posts bad-mouthing me had drawn a lot of criticism for being too harsh. His friends also called it psychological abuse, and he seemed to be isolated as a result. He lost his zest for life and now just goes between work and home. Furthermore, I heard that Ula was a terrible cook, and Jones was forced to eat her awful meals every day, looking haggard. On the other hand, I threw myself more into my work, and I'm about to get a raise. With the stress in my personal life gone, I feel like trying new things and recently started golfing. I hope to meet someone next time who can share a caring relationship.